The sun bled itself thin across the desert, a copper light settling low over the ridges, painting the dust with strange kind of holiness. Wind carried the grit of the day in long, whispering currents through the town of Silvervale, tugging at the loose shutters and bending the signboards until they creaked like old bones. Against this backdrop of weary wood and endless dust, a woman walked with a boy at her side. Her name was Mary Beth Carter. Her dress, once blue, but now dull to gray, clung in torn lines against her frame. Her auburn hair was pulled tight and low, those stray strands whipped across her face like nettles. Each step was purposeful yet heavy, as if the ground itself pressed her downward with the weight of every eye that lingered from a boardwalk. The boy, Eli, kept close, his small hand gripping her skirt in a way that made her balance seem steadier. He held in his other hand a wooden horse, one ear broken off, the paint worn to nothing. Silvervale had a way of watching that stripped the soul bare. Whispers rose as soon as Mary Beth turned onto the main street. A group of women in fine dresses murmured behind gloved fingers. A rancher leaned on the rail, spat tobacco into the dirt, and shook his head. A saloon door swung open and shut with a sound of laughter trailing after it. She felt every gaze settle like dust in her throat. Mary Beth was no stranger to gossip. It had trailed her since the day her husband, Thomas Carter, lost their farm to card tables and vanished into the horizon, leaving her with debts, a son, and silence. Survival in the West left little room for sympathy, and Silvervale had turned its back with quiet efficiency. Work was scarce, charity scarcer. Shame had become her companion, and tonight she had chosen to embrace it fully. The boy tugged at her skirt. "Mama." His voice was quiet, hushed, like he knew the world could crush the sound if it tried. She placed a hand over his and whispered, "Stay close." Ahead, the sheriff's office stood as solid as any building in town, with its brick foundation and iron stovepipe puffing faint smoke. Sheriff Luke Marston stood outside, arms folded, speaking to two deputies. His hat sat low, shadowing sharp cheekbones, and his boots, freshly polished, gleamed against the dust. Mary Beth remembered those boots by her bedside once, when he lay fevered and near to death. She had nursed him back with broth and damp cloths when no other hand had offered. That was years ago. Gratitude, she had learned, does not live long in Silvervale. She stopped before him, her shadow falling short on the boards. The crowd that had gathered by chance, or perhaps by curiosity's instinct, quieted just enough for her words to travel. Her voice was steady, though her heart was not. "Take me as your concubine," she said, the syllables cutting clean to the desert air. "I'll obey your every wish." For a heartbeat, the world seemed to stop. Then it cracked open with laughter, the brittle kind that cuts deeper than anger. A ranch hand elbowed his friend, a woman gasped, and a boy no older than Eli snickered behind his father's leg. Marston's eyes, green as weathered copper, narrowed. He looked her over, from the frayed hem of her dress to the hunger etched into her cheekbones. Then his gaze flicked to Eli, who pressed his face against her skirt, as if he could hide inside its folds. "You mistake pity for service," Marston said. His voice was cold, carrying easily over the gathering. "A man don't need devotion born of desperation. And I don't deal in scraps, Mary Beth. Not you, not your boy." The word struck like a whip. Murmurs rose, spreading like wildfire through the bystanders, feeding the air with cruel excitement. Someone chuckled aloud. Another spat into the dirt. Mary Beth's throat burned, her body frozen, yet her hand instinctively dropped to Eli's hair, shielding him. She turned without a word, the crowd parting in silence now, whispers trailing like dust devils behind her. Each step away felt heavier, though her spine stayed straight, rigid with the fragile dignity she had left. By nightfall, she and Eli had left Silvervale behind, the town's lantern shrinking to pinpricks swallowed by the desert dark. The prairie stretched vast, endless, carrying the sound of coyotes on the ridges and the low moan of wind weaving through mesquite branches. She built a small fire near a dry creek bed, the flames weak but steady, and wrapped Eli in her only blanket. His eyes blinked wide, watching the stars. "Mama," he said softly, "why don't they like us?" She smoothed his hair back, though her hand trembled. "It ain't us they hate. It's what they think we are. What are we?" The question cut deeper than Marston's cruelty. She swallowed, tasting the bitter ash of the fire. "We're people still," she whispered. "That's enough to keep walking." But in her heart, she wondered if it was. She thought of the laughter, of the shame seared into her bones, of the bargain she had offered and how it had been spat back at her. She wondered if dignity was nothing more than a mirage, shimmering in the heat only to vanish when one reached out. The days that followed blurred into survival. Hunger stretched their stomachs taut. Eli's feet blistered from walking, and her hands cracked from carrying water across dry ground. She sang to him at night, lullabies broken with pauses when her throat ached too much to finish. She told herself each dawn that she could not break, while he still clung to her hand. It was near one such dawn that they met Jonah Callan. He was a rancher, though not of the polished kind like those who filled Silver Vale's saloon with laughter. He rode a paint horse with a gait as weary as his expression. His coat was torn at the sleeve, his hat frayed at the brim. A scar split the skin near his brow, pale against sunburned flesh. He saw them by the creek bed where Mary Beth bent to wet a rag for Eli's forehead. Jonah dismounted without a word, pulled a canteen from his saddlebag, and offered it to her. She hesitated, pride a stone in her throat, but Eli reached first, drinking deep, water spilling across his chin. Jonah crouched, steadying the boy with a hand so gentle it seemed to belong to another world. "You've a long road," Jonah said quietly, his voice low as distant thunder. Mary Beth searched his face, expecting mockery, judgment, some trace of what Silver Vale had carved into every man and woman there. Instead, she found nothing but plain steadiness. He built no questions into his gaze. He did not pry. He rode with him to his homestead, a small cabin set against rolling hills, with chickens scratching the dirt and smoke curling from a crooked chimney. The air smelled with smoke and leather, of labor done by callous hands. Inside, the walls bore no trophies, no luxuries. Only tools hung in quiet order and a Bible worn at the edges. Eli was the first to find comfort, feeding chickens with shy grin, his small laughter slipping through the air like sunlight through shutters. Mary Beth stood at the threshold, uncertain whether to step inside or remain on the porch where dust clung to her boots. Days passed with Jonah saying little, yet each silence was softer than words had ever been in Silver Vale. He mended a fence while Eli fetched nails. He set bread on the table, without comment. He did not glance at Mary Beth in a way that weighed her down, nor did he avoid her as though her shame were contagious. But shame has a way of lingering even where kindness lives. One night, when the fire crackled low and Eli slept wrapped in quilts Jonah had laid out, Mary Beth felt the old ache rise. She sat across from Jonah, her hands wringing the fabric of her dress. "You've given us food and shelter," she whispered. "I have nothing to pay you with." Her voice faltered, then steadied with a kind of desperate courage. "Take me as your concubine. I'll obey your every wish." The words echoed too loudly in the quiet cabin, a shadow of humiliation on Silver Vale's boardwalk. Jonah's hammer still mid-motion where he had been repairing a chair. He set it down slowly, his gaze lifting to meet hers. For a long breath, silence stretched, thick as smoke. Then he shook his head, voice softer than she expected. "You've mistaken hunger for worth," he said. "You ain't for sale." Heat flamed through her cheeks, her chest tightening with a mixture of shame and something else, something like the faintest flicker of relief. He rose, placed another log on the fire, and walked to the door, leaving her with the crackling flames and the sound of Eli's breathing. Mary Beth sat rigid, tears stinging her eyes, unsure if she had been rejected again or saved from something she could not name. Outside, the desert wind carried the cry of coyotes, wild and distant, as though the night itself knew her secret. And in that moment, she realized Jonah's words had unsettled more than her pride. They had threatened to awaken the part of her she had buried deepest, the belief that she was still worth more than survival's bargain.